video is the very last bit of wedding content that I have to share with you. There is so much to consider when planning a wedding, whether it's big or smaller like ours, and I learned a lot through the planning process, so I thought I'd put together a list of tips and ideas that someone who's planning their wedding on a budget might find helpful. And if you're interested, our wedding video and a little recap, as well as some other fun ones like going wedding dress shopping, are already posted on the channel, so I'll have those linked in the description box below in case you're interested in checking them out. Tip number 1 is to prioritize your budget. The first thing you'll want to figure out when planning your wedding is how much you want to spend. The things that will cost the most are probably the venues, the photographer or videographer, the food, and your wedding dress if you're not careful. I think the best way to go about this is to decide what's most important to you, figure out the cost of those things first, and then see what's left in the budget to go towards the rest. Chances are this is going to come with reframing your expectations for certain things. For example, maybe there's a certain photographer you really wanted, but you find out that they cost like $3,000. If that's more than you expected, that will either mean lowering your costs somewhere else in your budget, like maybe your wedding dress, or you might have to find a different photographer. Just depends what's important to you. But just remember that a wedding is absolutely not something that anyone should be going into debt for, because all budgets can make something beautiful. Tip number 2, be willing to pay for peace of mind. So yes, you should stick to your budget, but just make sure you don't cause more problems for yourself down the line by trying to save a little bit of money. For example, maybe it's cheaper to get a food truck rather than catering, but now you might have to worry about renting cutlery, plates, glassware, and you'll probably have to go pick it up and return it afterwards. We were really happy with the venue we chose for our reception because they included so many things like catering, setup and takedown of tables, chairs, linens, napkins, runners, centerpieces, cutlery, glassware, plates, everything. It was a huge relief to not have to worry about all those moving parts. So remember that tracking down all these little things might not be worth saving a little bit of money in the grand scheme of things, especially if they inconvenience you. Tip number 3 is to give consignment store dresses a chance. I talked about this in depth in my wedding dress shopping video if you want to check that out, but basically how it went for me was I started my search at a consignment or used dress store. I got quotes for the dresses I liked, and then when I went to look at new dresses, the bridal consultant was able to match the price of the consignment store quotes because she wanted to get the sale. So those initial quotes ended up being a really good bargaining tool, especially for someone who is not about to start bargaining. Now, I bought my dress off the rack, which means a sample size dress that all the customers come in and try on. So I did have to have my dress altered slightly since it wasn't quite my size. But I would really recommend that because if you order the dress you try on in your perfect size with any customizations you might need, it will be full price and it can take up to a year for you to actually receive it because they are often made to order. Also, when you go shopping, make sure you tell the bridal consultant your budget and bring along some inspo pictures so they can get a good idea of what to show you. Also, if you're wanting a more reasonably priced dress, Etsy can also be a really good place to look. And I didn't know about it at the time and I haven't actually used it myself, but one of my favorites, Mia Maples, made a video where she had custom dresses made at luns.com, and it looks like if you give them your budget and some pictures or drawings of what you have in mind, they'll really do a good job of working with you and making your dress dreams come true. So it's definitely worth a look. Tip number 4 is to get wedding cupcakes. For our wedding, we did a 6-inch cake, which would basically be the top tier of a classic wedding cake just for us. We still wanted to have a small cake for ourselves that we could use to do that classic cake cutting. And traditionally, a lot of people will actually freeze the top layer of their wedding cake to eat 1 year later on their wedding anniversary. What we did was we cut our cake in half, ate 1/2 of it in the days following the wedding, and the other half we froze for later. I wasn't really sure how it would keep being that it was cut, but we wrapped it up really well, and a year later when we ate it, it tasted good as new. But for our guests, we opted for cupcakes. This was not only cheaper than a regular cake, but it allowed you to get different flavors and got us out of having to pay that pesky cake cutting fee that so many venues charge. Plus, we were able to hand them out personally to our guests. There's so much going on during your wedding day that sometimes it can be really hard to have a moment with each guest. So by handing out cupcakes, we were able to have that intentional time and thank everyone for coming. Tip number 5 is to spend time with your spouse. It's also very common to have the opposite problem where you're so busy rushing around on your wedding day, tied up with guests, family, and friends that at the end of the day, you realize you really didn't get that quality time with the person you're actually marrying. So we did a few things to make sure we really got that quality time together. One of my favorite parts of our whole wedding day was the time we allotted to do our first look and private vows. We got married on an old heritage church property, so we had the ceremony outside, but before it began, we were able to use the inside of the church to have that private time together. It was really, really nice because we were able to be ourselves, be emotional, and speak from our hearts without having any of that pressure from the crowd. It got all of those overwhelming emotions out of the way and took away any anxiety or nervousness that has come with every single wedding I have been a part of. It was just all smiles and joy, and I truly could not recommend doing that more. The other thing we decided to do for the reception was to opt for a sweetheart table for just the two of us rather than the traditional head table where you sit with your whole wedding party. I loved this because it really just felt like we were on an extra special date together. Tip number 6 is to be your own glam squad. If you're comfortable, this is going to save you a lot of money because getting your hair, your nails, your makeup, and maybe even your tan professionally done is going to cost a pretty penny. To keep costs down, you could either pick the one that's the most important to you or maybe pick the one that's the hardest for you to do yourself and have that one done professionally. I did most of these by myself, but I tried to elevate them a little bit to make them a little more special than my everyday. For my hair, I curled it just like this, how I normally do, but I did add in some hair extensions that I already had just to make my hair a little bit thicker. For my makeup, I wanted to look like myself, so I did my usual thing. Pretty much, this is the only makeup that I know how to do. I didn't even do eyeshadow, but it was the perfect excuse to try out these little cluster lashes. They're super cheap just from Amazon, and I like them so much that anytime I dress up now, I'll always put one on the corner of each eye. But I would definitely say make sure you practice with them a few times before your actual wedding day because it can be a little tricky to find the right placement. I used to actually glue them on top of my lashes because that's the only way I'd seen it done. But a couple months ago, I tried gluing them underneath my top lashes on my tight line, and oh my goodness, it's so much better. You can hardly tell that you're even wearing fake ones. For nails, I normally paint my own, so I was gonna do a little press-on nail moment for something special. I was actually gonna wear these. These ones are by Kiara Sky. Glamnetic also has a bunch of fun options, and you can even get these ones on Amazon. So there's lots of things you can do, but I have a friend who does nails, and she actually kindly offered to do my nails for me for my wedding gift. So that was the only thing that I had done professionally. Thanks, Jenny. As for the tan, it's gotta be self-tanner. I'll be the first to say I am still absolutely terrible at tanning my hands, but regardless if my hands are looking a little orange, I always find I'm more confident when I look like a golden chicken wing rather than a ghost. I like using the 2 Hour Express Mousse by Loving Tan. I have it in shade dark. With this one, you're gonna wanna put it on a couple days before your wedding so that you don't get any staining on the inside of your wedding dress, but it has a really nice color, at least on my complexion. Just don't get too carried away. That's the one that's tricky for the hands. More recently though, I've been using this one by Luna Bronze. It's a gradual tanning lotion that specifically is made to never stain anything, and I haven't had any troubles with that. It gives you a nice glow. I'm actually wearing it right now, so I wasn't super pasty for this video. But again, you just want to make sure you start applying it a few days before the wedding so you can build up to the color you like. Tip number 7 is to have a non-traditional bridal party. Of course, this fully depends on who you know and who's available to you, but if you're wildly popular or just don't want to disappoint anyone when you're choosing between family and friends, you have a few options. First of all, it seems like it's becoming a lot more popular to skip the bridal party altogether, especially if you're having a small wedding. Or maybe you are having a bridal party, but instead of them standing at the front with you, they're gonna just sit down with the rest of the guests. How it worked out for us was I thought it would be fun to include all of our nieces and nephews instead of a bunch of boring adults. girls. My husband and I both happen to have a nephew that's the same age and a niece that's the same age. So they were kind of like our bridesmaids and groomsmen. The two from Jay's side of the family walked down together and stood on his side, and the two from my side of the family walked down together and stood on my side. I also have two much younger nieces, so they walked down the aisle together as the flower girls. I felt like this was the perfect way to not have anyone feel like they were left out, and it was just super cute. Our colors were pink and green, so the boys wore green pants, pink bow ties, which they were probably not too happy about, and suspenders, of course, because I love those. And then the older girls had dresses from JJ's house, and the younger girls had dresses from Etsy. Tip number 8 is to get silk flowers. Flowers are another thing that can get crazy expensive, especially if you're wanting to use them for a lot of decor like garlands, centerpieces, or an archway. I think we can all agree that flowers are beautiful, but the thing is, they just don't last very long. And I've never really understood the concept of letting your beautiful bouquet wilt and die and then keeping its crumbling carcass on a dusty shelf somewhere in your home, because there are so many better options. Promise me that if you do get a real bouquet, you'll either have your flowers pressed and framed or preserved in resin to make a beautiful piece of art for your home. I didn't have enough money for that, so instead I got silk flowers. Mine are from Etsy, and the girl that I got them from even let me customize it and add in these really pretty light pink roses. They weren't cheap, but I was really impressed with the quality. I don't think you can tell that they're fake in any of the wedding pictures that we took. And in real life, even if you can tell that they're fake, who really cares? Now I have this beautiful bouquet that I get to keep on display, and it's not dead. As for the rest of the flowers, the corsages, boutonnieres, the little flower crowns the girls wore, and the little hair comb that I had at the top of my veil were all from Etsy as well. I would say that the hardest thing to find was the garland that we used to decorate the tree and the aisle at the ceremony, as well as the tables at the reception. I looked and looked, and the best one that I could find was actually from Shein, of all places. Jay also found a couple of cheap bouquets. I think they were from Winners, but Michael's is also a great place to look. We used one of those for the bouquet toss, and we gave the other one to the cake decorator, and she used it to decorate our cake as well as a cake table. The last thing I'll say about fake flowers is that they're really nice because, first of all, you can resell them and get a little bit of your money back. And if you're kind of smell sensitive like me, I noticed at prom that the corsage I was wearing on my wrist ended up giving me quite the headache at the end of the day. So silk flowers are a really easy way to avoid a headache that might come along with carrying around smelly flowers all day. Tip number 9 is to say no to stationery. This includes save the dates, invitations, menus, and any kind of signage like welcome signs or seating charts. I promise you, it's completely unnecessary because we threw our whole wedding without paying for any of it. Mind you, we had a small wedding, but instead of sending out save the dates, which would be even more work, we just texted everybody once we had the date secured. As for invitations, there are a lot of options. A popular one is to make a wedding website. You can often do this for free. Guests can go on and RSVP digitally, make food choices, note any allergies, and so on. So it's really nice to have all that information in one place to stay nice and organized. What we did was buy an invitation template off of Etsy. Here's the one that I made. I personalized it and added all the info on this site called Cordial, which was super duper easy. And then again, I just texted a picture of that out to the guests, probably a little later than I should have, but you really can't send those things out until you know the timing of everything anyways. And then one day, if I ever get around to making a physical wedding album, I'll just have to print out one copy for me. Tip number 10, don't overthink your wedding favors. Wedding favors can be a super fun way to incorporate your theme, but they can also end up really adding up in cost, especially if you're trying to give people something they might actually use. Because let's be honest, people do not need a precious keepsake they feel forced to keep for every single wedding they attend. I wanted our wedding to have a whimsical garden feel to it, so we actually gave out flower seeds as our wedding favors, which I thought was a really cute idea. For each guest, I put a few flower seeds in a tiny little envelope. They were probably like this like this big. On the back of the envelope, it said, "Let love grow," you know, for the romance. And I noted the type of flower seed in case anyone actually wanted to grow them. And then on the front of the envelope, I practiced my calligraphy and I wrote everyone's name. And then I put it where they were going to be sitting for the night. So the favors doubled as name cards for seating as well. Tip number 11 is to have a home fund in lieu of gifts. We might be the odd ones out here, but we actually didn't live together before we were married. So we were pretty much starting from scratch in the home department. There were a lot of things we needed, but if you know me, I am always going for a very specific aesthetic, and our engagement was very short, so I didn't have time to make a registry. I told anyone who asked that instead of gifts, we just wanted money to go towards our home fund, because what's better than shopping when you're not spending your own money? That's a little something I like to call shopping for free. So I made this home fund box, which we put on the signing table. So when people went up to sign our book, they could put a little envelope in here, hopefully with a little money in it. And now it's really nice because I use this box to store wedding keepsakes. Then when I sent out thank you cards, I thanked everyone who'd given us money by letting them know what their contribution had gone towards, whether it was our pink microwave or our green toaster. Tip number 12 is to know your audience. This one totally depends on what's fun for you and your guests. We had a very small guest list. There was only around 40 people at our wedding. It was really just immediate family and a couple friends. We decided to skip the open bar and the DJ because we weren't really trying to have a drunken dance party. But the thing is, even if we were, I really don't think that would have happened just based on the guest list. Instead, we had a cash bar if anyone wanted a drink, but you could also give out drink tickets if there's anyone in specific you wanted to cover for, or you could always put a bottle or two of something on the tables if you're wanting to provide something without the cost getting out of hand. It's also important to keep in mind that it can be really challenging to not only get people out on the dance floor, but to have them actually stay there and enjoy themselves. So I would really consider who's on your guest list before you pay for a DJ. I know that my family were not really that rambunctious, and all I wanted to do was the Macarena, the YMCA, and dance to a couple slow songs, so a portable speaker and a playlist were really all we needed. Tip number 13 is to have games and prizes. Just because we weren't going for the usual party vibes doesn't mean we weren't going for fun. We had a lot of the usual entertainment at the reception, but I also tried to add in a few things that you might not see at every wedding. Firstly, to decide the orders of the tables to get their food, we did a little game show quiz where the MC would ask multiple choice questions all about our relationship, and the first table that answered correctly was the next in line. During dinner, we played a slideshow full of pictures of Jay and I growing up. Those can kind of get a little bit long, and ours was, but that meant it was the perfect thing to play over dinner because there was music and it gave guests something to look at or talk about if they wanted to. Of course, we also had speeches and toasts, and my sister broke those up by doing a little flute solo in the middle. After that, we did 2 rounds of musical chairs with a chance to win a prize. Because what's more fun than a good old-fashioned game with prizes? The first round was for the kids, and the prize was a gift card to a bookstore/toy store. The second round was for the adults, and the prize was one of those Costco movie passes that has 2 admissions, 2 popcorns, and 2 drinks. I would highly recommend doing something like that. It was really fun to watch for anyone who wasn't playing, and there was quite a few people who got up to play that I didn't expect to. Bingo is another game that we considered. I don't know if it's the teacher in me, but people just love an easy game like that they don't play very often, especially if there's prizes involved. Another thing we did for the kids was a balloon pop prize wall where they would throw a dart at the corkboard full of balloons, a balloon would pop, and a prize would fall out. But the only problem was that the balloons would not pop. It malfunctioned a little. I think they needed to be blown up more, but either way, they had fun. We also did the wedding shoe game. For that, the bride and groom will sit back to back, holding one of their own shoe and their partner's shoe, and the MC asked us questions like who went in for the first kiss, and then you hold up the shoe of the person who's your answer. The couple can't see each other's answers while they're playing, but the guests can see, and it always gets a laugh. All of that was really fun. I wouldn't change any of it. Tip number 14 is don't go on your honeymoon right away. I feel like traditionally the idea is that people go on their honeymoons immediately after they get married, but it also seems like no one really considers the fact that one or both of you might be moving around this time, and it's just generally very busy. I think it's really important to take some time to settle into your new dynamic after the wedding, especially if you didn't previously live together. What we did was after the wedding, we had a little kind of staycation. Then I took some time off work so I I could move and start organizing all my stuff and make it as less stressful as possible. So depending on your situation, I would definitely consider waiting at least a month after your wedding to go on the actual honeymoon. For us, we got married in June and we actually have really lovely summers where we live. So we waited all the way until January to go on our tropical honeymoon to make the most of it and to get away from the cold Canadian winter. Tip number 15 is to do premarital counseling. This is probably the most important tip I can give you. We're Christians, so we did this with our pastor, who is actually also the officiant at our wedding. How it worked was he helped us work through a program called SYMBIS, which stands for Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. Essentially, you and your fiance will individually go through this kind of like questionnaire where it gathers information all about your personality types, love languages, conflict styles, money management, etc. And then our pastor or your counselor would facilitate meetings where you'll go through your results in these little booklets. It was really nice because we were able to talk about our similarities, our differences, and how we can continue to grow together by keeping those things in mind. We both found it extremely helpful because it was an intentional way to bring up things that you or your partner naturally do, think, or expect that maybe you hadn't even recognized in yourself yet. But even if you're not religious, I would really recommend doing some kind of premarital counseling because it's just an opportunity to strengthen your relationship and start things off on the right foot. So that brings us to the end of my 15 wedding tips and our wedding era. If I can still find any of the things that I mentioned in the video, I'll make sure to link them in the description box below. I really hope that this was helpful to somebody out there. Good luck if you are planning your wedding, and if you're not planning your wedding and you're still here, then I think it's safe to say we're officially besties. Thank you so much for being here. Now that the wedding stuff's all out of the way, we're gonna get back to our regular day-to-day life and have a little bit of travel content sprinkled in there as well. See you next time.